All right, welcome everybody. This is our second class in our series we're going to be doing all year, and we're bringing value to the community of people interested in real estate. And our last class was on self-employed borrowers, and this week we're going to be talking about how to build a real estate portfolio quickly using the tools that are available to you in real estate finance, and also just using good strategy and skills. So in our presentation, we're going to be highlighting basically just an easy template to acquire, well over $1 million in real estate, 3 properties, and as little as $50,000 investment to start off your real estate portfolio. And just talk about general principles of acquiring wealth through real estate. And I didn't want to do that alone as a mortgage broker, so I brought in an expert in real estate, Curtis. Great to have you.
I will take that.
And so to get started, just a couple things. If you don't have the materials that we're sending out, we will get them to you, so we'll need your email address. And so either during this presentation or afterward, you can message Black Diamond Mortgage and let us know your email address, and we've got a outline of what we talk about. And we've got a real estate scenario that's actually a real estate scenario in the Flathead market, just to give you a vision of how this could be done, and a few other things. And so we want you to get those materials, so definitely reach out with your email address and get that. And next month we'll be doing another one, and we are still deciding the topic, but next month will either be construction, so that people wanting to get construction going in the year 2022 will get the toolkit for getting construction financing put together. And we're also considering we've always done Fix Your Credit February in the past, and so anybody that feels credit challenged and wants to get into real estate, the playbook for how to get your credit where it needs to be to buy real estate. But with that, I think I'll start with you, Curtis. If you just want to introduce yourself and tell us about your career in real estate, and also your own personal buying real estate real quickly, just so everybody can get to know you.
Sure thing. Well, thanks for having me, first of all. So Curtis Wagner, I'm a real estate advisor here at this office, actually, at the Kalispell, Engel & Volker's Western Frontier office. I've been in real estate for just over 5 years now. I average around 30 to 35 transactions representing both sellers and buyers, kind of an equal split. And this last 2021 finished out the year at over $13 million in sales. Personal transactions, I have purchased 4 homes, and each time it's kind of followed the same typical steps that real estate brings you into. You start with a smaller home as your first introductory home, first-time home buyer. Kind of just capitalized on the equity and the 2-year process, stayed in that one for 2 years, sold that one with a profit, dumped that one into another one, and moved up step by step. And so now I'm on my 4th one, and kind of got situated with the home size that we want, and it's been a great process just capitalizing on the investment. You're investing in yourself.
Well, great. That's a good strategy. So that's in addition to what we're talking about today. What Curtis has done is basically about tax advantage, that 2-year window, right?
Yep.
And then what we're slightly honed in on today is least amount of cash required to acquire lots of real estate, and all of it works as long as you have a strategy. Myself, I own Black Diamond Mortgage with Maria Phelps, and I've been in the mortgage business for 15 years and have seen multiple market cycles. And my own personal first real estate investment was, I got married in 1996, and my wife and I moved to Montana, and part of that move was real estate price driven. We were in Colorado, and things were way more expensive in Colorado, and at that time, it sounds crazy to talk about it right now, but coming to Montana was a low-cost way to enter real estate. So we thought we could afford to make a life here, so we bought a house in Whitefish. It was a 2-bed, 1-bath house. It was $77,000. And at the time, I was working at a tire shop, and my wife was working at the Sportsman Ski House, and we were able to do that. And I remember specifically, though, that that price we paid, the locals who lived in the market were telling us that we were overpaying at 77,000, and that just a year earlier, that same house might have been 50,000. And we had to go through this tension about, should we buy a house right now, knowing that the price is much higher than what other people who had been living in that market had experienced in the past. And so looking back, it's like, oh, that was a great decision. But when we were experiencing it, it was emotionally challenging to pay top price for a home, And so I also included in the email out a really great photograph. So if you can't see it right now, I'm going to just describe it to you. You can visualize it. But there's a realtor up in Whitefish, Dodd is his name, and he is in the photo in the 70s with his dad, I think, but he's standing in front of a sign at Happy Valley, and it says you can buy a lot in Happy Valley home sites for $600.
Yeah.
And you can get into it monthly for $10 a month. And there's a family, and they're standing there, and so you look at it now and you think, my gosh, that's so cheap. Like, lucky them.
Yeah, I'd take a lot for $600.
Yeah, but I was actually alive then, and I remember that wasn't like that was hard.
Yeah.
So to scrounge up the money was hard back then, and everything. I remember in early '80s in my family, like one year we got a VCR and it was $800, and we all didn't get gifts that year. So we could get a VCR because that was the big thing at the time,
I'm sorry,
So
a what?
yeah, it's this tape, and you put it into.
You have to show that to me one day.
Yeah, it doesn't mean anything now. That's crazy technology, but at the time you could watch a movie in your house, and so. But at the point being, the sacrifice required with money was hard, and so here we are in this current market. It seems a little overwhelming, which is why I wanted to do the class.
Yep.
And so, big major point number one that we want to get to today is to have a strategy if you'd like to acquire a lot of real estate. And so we're going to run through kind of but to give you like an easy principle, the lending environment is such that the government and a lot of programs incentivize getting your first house. If you want to acquire a lot of real estate, you really need to look at that piece when thinking about how can I acquire a lot of real estate, because they're providing you a lot of assistance. And so one of the things is very little down payment required to buy a primary residence. And so the easy playbook is essentially that you can acquire a whole bunch of real estate if done strategically with very little down to get your foot in the door into the real estate market. And I just think a lot of people, their first move to get real estate is more driven by, we need to buy a house now because we got married, or we just had kids, which is great, but then the strategy is different.
It is. It's 100% different.
So with a long-range goal in mind, you can do both. And so this is just an example, and then if anybody has any questions, reach out anytime during this and we will address your questions. But Curtis, why don't you talk about a little bit about what you've experienced dealing with clients, or just your own opinions as it comes to the strategy of deferring your dream house for the opportunity to acquire some real estate first, and then maybe get your dream house down the line.
Yep. Like you said, it's a strategy. It's a completely different mindset. And the first thing I'd like to say is it's not a sprint. It is a long-term goal. Some of the things that I've ran into when people are considering, hey, this is the type of house that we really have dreamt of wanting. This is our dream house. You get people that come in and they want the moon, and it's their first house. But in this strategy here, you don't have to think of it as your dream house. That's your ultimate goal. That's your end goal. So in order to get there, if you're looking for, why you would defer to your dream home and start out acquiring these properties, if you're looking for acquiring a rental property, you might think about, your dream home might be in the rural area, might be out in the woods, might be a long ways away from home because you don't like the hustle and bustle of the city life. But it's going to be harder to find renters that want to go that far out. There may be one or two that do like that, but the majority of them are going to want the convenience of the amenities in town. Another one is size. Your dream home, it's generally not going to be a 900 square foot house with 2 bedrooms. So you want this 4,000 square foot home, you want 2, 3 living areas. The larger square feet, the more bedrooms, more maintenance, more upkeep, higher taxes on it, your rent has to be a lot higher as well. So keeping in mind, your size of a home, your dream home is going to be a lot larger most likely than acquiring some of these properties. Lastly is we all have a unique style. Your style might be very, very modern, or it might be rustic. There's a lot that you might like in a home that's to your style, but it doesn't appeal to the masses. So think about that when you're acquiring these homes. It does not have to be the rustic log cabin of your dreams. It just has to be a good, functional, quality built home.
That's great advice. So essentially, you need something that's gonna last and produce cash flow, and then you're looking down the road for the dream home.
Well, yeah, I mean, I use the example of, a dream home. Some people like to have this master bedroom that is on the top floor, overlooks the lake. A lot of renters, they don't want the master bedroom climbing upstairs. So what's unique to you is to you, but when you're doing this strategy, look to the masses, look at what's going to appeal to most people.
Good. And so in cash flow homes, I don't know what you've seen, but what makes, so I think you addressed a few pieces, but when you want to get a home that's good at cash flow, what are the things you're trying to help people see out there?
Well, I'll start with the first point when talking about a cash flow home is I like to go off the 1% rule. 1% rule of thumb is that your rental rate should be at least 1% of your purchase price. So your gross rental rate would be divided by what you bought the home for. But just because it meets that 1%, or maybe it's just below that 1%, oh no, I can't go purchase this, it's a bad choice because it doesn't meet the 1% rule, doesn't necessarily mean that it's a bad choice, or it doesn't necessarily mean it's a perfect choice if it is just at 1 or above 1. There's a lot of different factors in there that come into a cash flow home. And that's really going to be your income and expenses. Okay, so you have your income from your rent, and then you have expenses. So that's one large thing that you have to think about. Just because it might rent out for a good price, there are different expenses to each home based on where it's located, neighborhoods. So things that you talk about, expenses, operating expenses. You have your mortgage, you have taxes, you have insurance, and then you have your, I like to call it like vacancy fund, to where what happens on the weeks or months that it's not rented. And then you have your maintenance fund. So what about that, the HVAC system that you need to service every single year? What happens if the water heater goes out? So you have to have a reserve fund. You also have, a lot of times as you acquire more properties, you have a property management company. So you have to take all those in consideration. So you take your gross income, you minus those expenses, plus your reserve funds, and that's your cash flow.
So basically,
One more time. Gross income minus expenses.
And minus you can group in your reserve fund as an expense, but a lot of people like to separate that because they don't think of that as an expense. But that's one of the biggest ones, because if you have a water heater that goes out, or you have a roof for some reason that needs to get replaced down the road, those are huge expenses. And we could go into the numbers, but I don't think this class kind of is diving huge into the numbers. But you got to equate for 10% on a maintenance fund. Property management companies, they're anywhere from 9 to 12%.
an easy way to do this is if you grab just a regular old personal tax return, there's a form on there called Schedule E, and that's how we look at the cash flow of property, but basically breaks down the typical costs of home ownership, and you have to report it to the IRS in order to write off the expenses. But a good strategy would just be to put your income at the top, chunk them out underneath, and see if you got a net income at the bottom, you know. There was one other question.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna say, like, finding the 1% rule nowadays, as you are well aware, it's impossible to me unless you're buying multifamilies. Like, single families are going for upwards of 300, and
Sure.
that's nowhere near even close to the 1% rule. Like, I'm saying, what are you guys finding as far as, like, I know it's a rule of thumb, so
Yeah.
everything I'm buying is not 1% rule. Like,
So the question is, just so we can get it on the microphone, is the 1% rule, and it's hard to do in the market right now. You know, what are we doing about that? What are we seeing? So.
Yeah, you know, it like you said, it is a rule of thumb, and so it's really about what works for you. You know, if you can get a property where you can get it rented at least after living in it for a year, after living in it for 2 years, and you can get someone that comes in and gets close to what you're paying for your mortgage. You know, even if it's 75%, and David will talk about that later, but if you can get that close, then you can move on to the next property, count that as income, you know, and then you can move on to your next property. So the margins do get a little tighter. You know, some of these margins before, where you were seeing a huge profit, you know, on just one. I think now, you know, this whole strategy is acquiring multiple ones so that you can, you know, make a decent income off it and get your dream property.
You almost have to do short-term rentals.
Yeah, it's that short-term rentals are that's going to be your biggest, quickest bang for your buck over here. There's a lot of restrictions on it though, so finding that exact property, and then the price points on those properties can be pretty steep as well because they can be rented out nightly.
So when it comes to short-term rentals, they're more profitable. They're a little harder for gaining qualification for mortgages. So once you get them, that's a great option if they're able to be rented. When you're trying to buy them and acquire them, you're going to have more success convincing lenders to like what you're doing if you're doing it quickly without the history of success by getting ones that can cash flow on a monthly basis. And so the scenario we've outlined today kind of uses the monthly as the guide, but once you get the properties, it's a true statement that you're going to make more finding those other opportunities for rent. I think I'll hop into that now. So if you have the email, you've got this 3-page scenario that I drew up, and if you don't, I'll just talk you through it real quick. I'm not going to go line by line through the scenario, but I just want to give you a vision for using the lending tools that exist for young families to gain a real estate portfolio. So the easiest thing to understand is they're not requiring a lot down. And then once you acquire one property, you can then convert that to a rental to go acquire your next property. And that leverage and movement is what gets you the quick access to lots of real estate. And so in the US, with the way lending is right now, just the easy principle is once you say you're going to buy something as your primary residence, you're basically saying that's what's going to be the case for the next year. At the end of the year, you're up for doing it again. And there's the big opportunity because every time you buy a primary residence, you don't have to put very much down. And so if you're willing to move and you want to start, instead of going to the dream house first, if you want to go at the real estate portfolio first, the first thing you got to get in your head is how many times can I use the primary residence benefit to maximize my situation? And you know, in general, you can use it several times. Over time, there will become a moment where a lender is going to look at you and say, well, wait a second, you know, but you can get 3 really quick and you look completely fine and you're not doing anything wrong, so it's available to you. So house number 1, 0 to 3% down. So buying yourself a house, any house, and so I pulled up one on, I just went on to Curtis's real estate search engine, and I did this on Sunday, and I pulled up a house, and there was a cute little house in downtown. I don't know much about the details other than the fact that it was in that amazing price point of like $300,000. And so I was like, ooh. And so what was my driver there? Well, one of you asked a question like, hey, how do I get into this? None of these numbers pencil out. Get something that you can buy. So there's one out there, it exists, it's on the market, it's in that price range. It's probably a dumpy little old house, but it's a house. It's got bones and and it's in Kalispell and you can rent it later. So I did the numbers, and a person could qualify for this house. The mortgage payment with everything in it, using only 3% down, is $1,657 a month. Okay, so you're buying a $300,000 house. If you do 3%, you're investing $9,000 to get your first house. Okay, You could potentially buy your first house with the 0 down options. I do want to throw into the mix though that if you're thinking of a long-term rent strategy, the 0 downs, a lot of them have rental restrictions when you take that financing. So if your next move is going to be to rent, check with whoever you're getting the mortgage through and make sure that that 0 down is worth it to you if your real goal is to have it for 1 year and then flip it to a rental. You might be in the wrong financing product if you got like a down payment assistance option or one of these things. And so there's a program out there, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, it's 3% down, and you can convert it to a rental, and there's no harm, no foul after 1 year ownership, and you can do 5% down and do the same things. That's a great product. Every time I say down payment in this presentation, just know it's gifted is okay. So if you have family that want to help you do this, that is okay. So you don't, the grand total of everything we're going to talk about is getting well over $1 million in real estate, I think like $1.3 million, and you put $50,000 on the table, and you need to be able to make a mortgage payment, one mortgage payment, and that's the secret sauce. So you buy house number 1, you need a minimum income of $54,000 a year. That's reasonable. If you are a couple or an individual, in today's world of having a job, that's not a crazy income. It's not a super high income. You can enter the game with very little money and a $54,000, and you can buy that house that I outlined there. So then you get your first house, you move in, and then you start planning, and maybe a few months into it, you start talking to Curtis again. You say, hey, let's start getting ready. When I hit my 1 year anniversary, I want to do it again, So if you flip it over to the next one, I found in Kalispell 2 houses on 1 lot, which is a 2-unit property, and this is important. And one of the members of our audience asked about this question, but some way, if you're going to try to acquire multiple properties and you want to do it easily and quickly, try to find a multi-unit that you can afford. And the reason is, on a multi-unit, the rentals of the other units, if you live in one, count towards your qualifying income. So if you buy a 2-unit and in the current market, the prices are up, but rents are up, which really helps you, because if you can rent a unit, the appraiser can go out and confirm for the lender that you can rent that other unit for quite a bit of money, which means you can put that money on your loan application to qualify for more house. But either house number 1 or house number 2, it's great if you can get multi-unit, because the other units help you qualify to own this property. So in this scenario that we outlined, once you buy the second property after year number 1, you're actually getting ahead on your income, your qualifying income, because now you're going to rent house number 1, and then you're going to go buy a 2-unit property and rent the other unit. And so now you've got 2 rentals going, and you only own 2 properties, and now your rental income's starting to push slightly above where you were before, which is going to help you in another year when you go for house number 3. So at some point, look for the multi-unit. A couple details I want to point out about multi-units. FHA is kind of the best multi-unit product out there, and basically it's 3.5% down. A 1-unit loan is in like the 400,000s, and then as you go into multi-units, they raise the loan limit. So you can get a pretty, decent property with either 2, 3, or 4 units, and use the rental of the other units to qualify you to make this purchase. And you're still only putting 3.5% down. And the government's totally good with this product because they're actually interested in helping people acquire real estate. And so back when they created FHA, one of the ideas was to move people out of poverty through homeownership. And so they actually like people buying a multi-unit rental and helping. And the idea is if you get a piece of real estate and you become successful, you'll move out of a lower income environment. And so this is a desirable situation. And then at that point, on the scenario that I drew up, you're renting the other unit and you don't have any more income from your job, and you now have 2 properties and you're cash flowing, and your actual cash out-of-pocket investment up and until property number 2 is $25,000. And so now you're owning $760,000 worth of real estate because you got 2 homes, and you're cash flowing on your job, regular old job.
And you've moved out of the first house.
You've moved out of the
Now
first
you're into
house.
the second house.
Yeah, good point. So you have to. You can. So the primary residence piece is needs to be validated by a lender. A couple details, getting into the weeds, but good stuff to think about is occupancy must be for the year that you're taking the loan, and you have 60 days to take occupancy and still be legitimate. So you can buy one that's rented and not be able to get into it for 2 months, and that's still okay to buy as your primary residence. And there's other details like that that are worth looking at. So when you're buying multiple properties and you're moving, yes, this can be your primary residence. Usually it's dictated by, you know, like as you get farther into it, and you know, they look at things like where do you get your bills mailed, your tax returns, you know, so you need to live in the place, you know, and they do want to know that you're living in it. But 1 year is the standard, and after a year you're kind of cleansed of the responsibility to stay that way, so you can move on to the next one. That's where the real opportunity is just doing it for the amount of time that they require and then doing it again. And so then maybe on home number 3 you do move into your dream home. So in the scenario I outlined, I went ahead and assumed that by the time you get to year 3, maybe you are making just a little bit more money, and maybe you're buying one that isn't as likely to be a rental, because now you've got 2 rental properties and you're moving into home number 3. Now you're going to settle down, because now you've got $1,260,000 worth of real estate and you got mortgage debt almost that high. Maybe you need to take a break and kind of let the market help you, you know. So if you'd have done this scenario a couple of years ago, the market would have given you a big gift, because while you took on the debt, then the market went up, and so now you're actually in, and you've got a mortgage that's less than what you actually own, just because the market went up. And so that's the huge opportunity.
Absolutely. The beauty of real estate.
Yeah.
Would you recommend like an HELOC at that point, or pull some of the equity from the appreciated and then purchase like for the fourth? Is that like a strategy you would?
So I'm getting a question about using the equity from the homes, and yes. So once you get the homes and you gain equity, one of the cool tools that you can use is that equity can then become a way to get down payment money for other future purchases, such as using a home equity line of credit. You can do cash out refinance loans. So my idea is big picture here, and maybe you can jump in on this through your own experience. But so the playbook is use the primary residence tools as far as you can use them and handle them to gain a portfolio, and then settle in. And then start, you know, pay your mortgage, hang in there for a while. The market, using those examples I brought at the beginning of the class, time is going to take care of things if you can afford the payments. You know, so maybe it takes 10 years to get the big jump in real estate, but eventually it's going to happen, because history is a guide. We can look back in history and see that everybody wants to own real estate. Eventually the prices go up, and now the beauty is once you've secured your real estate, your acquisition cost has been capped, and your principal and interest has been capped. So everything can keep going up from there, but yours doesn't. So if the market goes up from there, one of the benefits is you can use that equity, and so now maybe you don't need to use low down payment products in the future because you have equity. You know, equity will give you the ability to pull cash out and buy more property if that's a goal. So.
Yeah. No, I like what you said there. It doesn't go up. Your payments don't go up. You know, it's capped. So people are kind of weary of even this market of getting in. Well, I'm going to wait it out. Who knows? You know, a year from now, we could still be escalating. And what you could afford 12 months ago, now you can't afford.
Exactly.
So things change. So jumping in and taking that, I wouldn't call it a risk. It's real estate, but good things come from taking some risks. But I like what you said there, that it caps out.
And just do what you can afford. So at Black Diamond Mortgage, we've had clients coming in, and maybe the exact thing they wanted to do this year is out of their price range. In Montana as a state, there's stuff in your price range. And that's probably one of the things I would like to emphasize the most, is if you are just like focused, hyper-focused on the town of Whitefish, and you're like, I can't get into Whitefish. But you're right, you might not be able to get into Whitefish right now. But if you start building wealth through real estate, down the road, you might get the tools to get into whitefish, if that's a goal of yours. You know, examples would be like communities that are maybe an hour out from here are much less priced than this community. And so what are you trying to do? You're trying to build real estate empire, trying to take advantage of real estate values going up. Well, they're going up nationwide. So if there's one you can afford in another market, use that one to get you started. Because if you don't start, the whole system might just keep moving along and you're getting left behind. And that's a bummer, because I've had a lot of clients in my office recently that were in 2019 thinking they were gonna wait for it to cool off. You know, now what's cooling off look like? Maybe it'll get back to 2019. You know, but had they pulled the trigger, they would have been better off. And we didn't know. I didn't know when they were asking me these questions. You know, want to hit a couple other things while we're on this. And everything I was just talking about is buying primary residences over and over again, because the huge benefit is the least amount of down payment required. Okay, so that's the carrot on doing it that way. If you have like 25% to put down on a property, here's another beautiful thing in lending. In that scenario, you can buy as many homes as you want and cash flow the homes just over and over again without limit for the most part. So just use easy math, like you buy $1 million piece of real estate and you put $250,000 down and it has rental potential, then the rental income from that property can immediately be on your application to help you. So the 25%, and sometimes it's 20%, but if you have that down payment, then basically you can just buy. You don't have to season it a year. You don't have to, there's lenders out there that are happy with that equity position. And so if you want to buy a lot of rentals, or another scenario might be like, I'm capped out in my income, I can't afford any more property. If you have that down payment, that's not true. You can literally buy as many as you want with that amount of down payment. So common misconception is I don't have rental experience, or I only make $100,000 a year, so I can't afford property number two. Outside of that scenario I just outlined, buying primary residences and moving them every year to rentals. If you just want to buy rentals, the 20 to 25% down scenario is going to be limitless. So if you don't want to do it the way we talked about, where you buy primary residences and then move out and buy another one, if you can save up 20 to 25% down, you can just buy them. You don't have to come up with all cash or 100%. You know, so building a real estate empire with that down payment is the rental income. The lenders are going to give you credit for it right away. And some people think you need 2 years experience and things like that. And the current lending environment is they'll give you the market rent right away. So that's a great opportunity for people who have a little bit of money. So I've got a question from the back. Go ahead.
With that option of putting 20 or more % down, what's the personal income limit on that? How much income does an individual have to have in order to be able to just buy a property for rental income?
That's awesome. So Kaylee just asked me if you don't even, let's just pretend like you don't have very much income. So let's, I'll just make a scenario up here, but let's just say you have a $500 rental in some room of a friend, and you make $1,500 a month, and that's it. There's no other debt, but you just don't have a lot of income. But you have a 25% down payment, you want to buy a rental. The cool thing is there's lending products in the market right now that are like, go, do it. So what do we need to get the deal done? The primary thing is just some basis of rent. So we'll have to get like an appraiser or a third party, like landlord company, or somebody's gonna have to step in and say, this will rent for X, and as long as it clears the mortgage, you're in. Great question. In fact, that's super motivational if you don't wanna do, if you don't wanna have enough income to qualify to buy your own primary residence and do this multi-step process. The other way is down payments, so.
And you had a question as well?
Yeah, you sort of answered it. It was kind of along those lines. I don't know if my lender was being maybe more conservative, but for example, we purchased a multifamily that had leases in place already, and we were trying to get into the property, and I rents are already established and we're gonna inherit those leases, so if this is our income, can you use that as part of the income? And it was like, as if they didn't want to use it. Again, maybe they were trying to keep it simple and not go down that route of, getting do you see that?
Yeah.
happening? Maybe
So the
it's
question
different.
being asked, just to get it into the mic, is a person here watching this presentation was trying to get multi-unit property, and they were not being given credit for the current leases. So basically there's two kinds of lending in the world right now, that just to keep it super simple, there's traditional and then there's non-traditional. So there is non-traditional lending happening right now. So when you walk into the bank, most banks are not doing non-traditional lending. So what is non-traditional lending if you need it? Well, basically there are lenders out there who are offering loans based on the income potential, as long as you've got skin in the game, and that's their entire business, and they're not banks. They're basically what you call like a hedge fund. A bunch of rich guys have gotten together and they say there's a big opportunity in the market. It's people that want to do things that don't have either tax return income or rental income experience, and in their mind, if you got the down payment, you've addressed their risk situation, and as long as those rents are there. Now, why isn't everybody doing that? Okay, well, there's an upside and a downside. The upside is you can get the loan. The downside is they're running about 1.5% higher on the interest rate. Okay, so why not? I mean, they're offering a product that nobody else is offering. So if the interest rate on an average mortgage is 3 or something percent, and you go get one of these products, it's going to be like 4.5 or somewhere in there. You just do the cash flow math, focus on that, because if you're in an acquisition mode and you end up getting all this stuff, the beauty is you can make adjustments down the road. So a statistic that I know, because I own a mortgage company, is the average mortgage never survives longer than 5 years. Well, what happens? Well, their circumstances change and they get a new mortgage. So that mortgage you're staring at to acquire the property is exactly that. But the average homeowner, even if they just buy one house and they cycle it through an entire 30-year lifespan, the average homeowner is going to go through like 4 or 5 mortgages in that. Well, why does that happen? Well, they buy the house goes up in value, maybe they take some of the equity and do another loan. Or they buy a house and they got to put their kids through college and they decide to use the house. Whatever the reason is, your equity goes up, the interest rates go down, other things happen. It makes sense to look at financing over and over again every couple of years. As you get more properties, you also have the ability to consolidate. So if you have 10 properties, maybe you only need mortgages on 3 or 4 of them. So you start tightening things up, and then that's freeing you up in other areas. So getting at the, if you use a product that is currently a little bit higher in the rate than the absolute best you could do if you met all the qualifications, you're probably in that relationship for 2 to 3 years. And usually I just give my clients the math. I'm like, hey, if you buy this $400,000 investment property and you take a higher rate, it's going to cost you $20,000 or $30,000 over the next couple of years more. Well, a lot of people looking over their shoulders the last couple of years are like, that's a risk I'm willing to take because the market outperformed that. And so you just have to make a decision. Is it worth it to go now, or is it worth it to wait? Because meeting everything that a bank wants you to do to get everything, banks are conservative. As a general rule, the bank is in business to protect the depositor's money. On the brokerage side, we use bank loans, but we also use like that product we talked about. Those are people that are kind of like you. They're an investor, and they're in it with you. And so that's a way to solve the problem. So they're absolutely tools to solve the problem. And I actually put this on at the bottom, but I'll move it up. Never take no for an answer in lending. The answer is when and how, and it's never no. So if you're getting no, you need to know why the answer is no, and then you need to start working that. Start talking to people. Like this gentleman just did in the audience. He said, I was just at the bank and I was told no. And then now we're talking, right? So don't take no for an answer in real estate. There's a lot of successful real estate people that when you look at their lifespan of work, you see them run into no all the time, but they find a yes. Or they go, what's the playbook? Give me the tools.
Well, I'll back that. I mean, I've seen countless times on people that have come up to me and said, I really wanted to buy a house, but I went to go talk to the bank or I went to a lender, and I got told no for such and such reason. And I said, let me refer you off to someone that I know that is willing to take on your special situation and scenario. Had luck with them in the past, and sure enough, within a couple weeks, they're approved, and then within another couple weeks, they're under contract with the house. And they couldn't be more ecstatic and thank me for, it's not me that did it, it was the lender that helped them out, but at least I was able to give them that opportunity of not shutting down their dreams. So it is definitely, you can go to different lenders, they have different programs.
Well, hey Curtis, if you're not prepared to answer this one on the spot, it's fine. But one thing I had written down that we might talk about is contract strategy. Do you have any advice for people on, especially in this market, it's kind of like you go out there and if there is that one thing that everybody's going to want, maybe everybody wants it, right?
Yeah.
So we're coming into this idea and we're going to buy multiple properties, and we've been to the mortgage lender and we're approved to buy something, and we come to Curtis's office, and what's our strategy? Like, how do we win the contract war?
Well, right now, the times of being super creative on, a contract is ever present. There are many different ways to structure a contract. One of the biggest things that I do is, find out first what is your ultimate goal. What are your restrictions? What's your income restrictions? How much are you putting down? Those type of questions that I ask to get that information. And then, the first thing I do is actually call the other agent, and I ask them what's important to your seller. Is it a longer close? Is it a shorter close? What's their concerns on earnest money? Do they feel like they wanted more security? Do you need to put more down on that? And different things that are important. Hey, they don't want a lot of risk, and so they may not want all these contingencies. So then we go back to the drawing table, and we write up. I always recommend a home inspection. I always recommend it. There have been some scenarios where, hey, we probably are going in at the same price point as 8 other people. You don't have the ability to go above and beyond. So what are some things in this contract that we can make more attractive? And so knowing and understanding the risk of not, which I always explain to them, of not getting it into home inspection, there could always be something that you don't know. It looks good on the outside, looks good when you go walk through it, but what's under that rug? What's going on with the HVAC and the water heater? What about the roof? So there are risks to that, but
there's a negotiating opportunity once you get the inspection, right? Because you're under contract.
Absolutely.
You've got a price. So now you won the contract, but now that you know the condition of the home, there's opportunity there, right?
There is opportunity. If you have an opportunity to go back to the seller and have them address and fix some of these major concerns for you, which I always say should be structural and safety concerns. Those are the biggest things. That every home, even new construction, is going to have a list of small things that maybe isn't up to code, or that an inspector, they're doing their job, they're going to find it. But you can go back and negotiate with that seller to say, hey, in lieu of you not fixing these, we're going to ask for a lower purchase price. Or, hey, we want you guys to fix all these things so we don't have the burden on us once it's ours and we're the owners of it.
And I'm not 100% sure I understand this, but maybe you can clarify. In Montana, once you know facts about a property, you have to disclose those facts, right?
You do.
So obviously not everybody's 100% ethical, but if you get that information presented to the seller is faced with the reality at that point that they're no longer able to market that property without being like, it needs a new HVAC system, because now everybody knows, right?
Right. The technical term is adverse material effect. They now know if it fell out of contract and the buyer or seller walked away and said, hey, I'm not willing to fix these things, and because the seller says I'm not willing to fix these things, buyer says, okay, we're not going to purchase the home, we get our earnest money back, we're going to move on to the next one. Now, as a seller and as a seller's agent, you are required, because you now got a copy of that report, because they get to see what's on the report of the things that get called out, and they have a copy of the inspection notice of the things they wanted. That is now known to the seller. Now they know that, their dishwasher has a problem or has a leak. Now they know that the roof is at the end of its lifespan. So when they go to market again and they get a call from a buyer's agent and they say, hey, what happened? You know, there's certain restrictions we can't talk about every contract, but they then have to disclose it fell out due to inspection. Then there's an owner's property disclosure. They now need to update their owner's property disclosure, which lists all known adverse material effects on the house, all known things that a buyer would want to know before purchasing the house, ethically.
So it sounds like it may not be comfortable for everybody to have fun at this stage of the game, but you can help your client get a better deal.
Absolutely, because it really does only hurt the seller in the long run. You know, they better take care of some of these major issues because the next buyer is going to have the same concern. And the next buyer is not going to want to, you know, give you your purchase price of what you're asking, knowing that there's these issues.
So I'm glad we talked about that, because what we get at our mortgage office a lot right now is people sending us kind of, I guess you call it like a junk property, and saying, can you lend on this? And it's kind of an interesting question, because everybody's looking at the property and it is what it is, right? Like, and the seller might not be talking about anything wrong with it right now. And I tell them, I say, well, let's get it under contract and then let's see if we can make it through. And if I'm doing real estate purchase as a strategy, I'm not gonna get emotionally offended if I don't make it all the way through. But if I wanna get a good deal, maybe we take a shot at it, because once all this stuff hits the table, if we survive that, I just got a good deal on a piece of real estate, you know? So, great
Yeah.
point. Any other big points on contract strategy? I got a couple other things. but
I think we
wanna
can
make
move on from it.
Cool.
Yep.
Like the financing, have a strategy, you know, don't just willy-nilly write a contract. One thing I will say that Curtis mentioned, and it's important, is we just had a client in our office yesterday that we qualified them for a loan at a certain price, and they made this comment to me, and I think it's an important comment to address. They said, well, we talked to our realtor and she said that they're only taking cash offers. And I said, you know, you need to go back to your realtor and you need to straighten this out. I go, you're a loan buyer. Your realtor should be happy to be working with you as a loan buyer. So when you are working with your realtor, you're coming in, let's say you're coming in approved at $500,000. You're a $500,000 buyer, and you need to be working with a realtor who's calling you a $500,000, not a non-cash buyer. Because the reality is if that seller thinks the deal's gonna close, it's not that big a deal to them whether you're cash or loan. What do they care about? They want you to close. And so encourage, or for yourself, you know, and make sure you're working with the team that is totally fine with the fact that you're getting a loan if you're getting a loan. And don't look at that as an obstacle. It's all about the presentation. Curtis just said it straight up. He's gonna call that selling agent and he's gonna find something that they're interested in. And that will immediately take the focus off of whether it's cash or whatever, because if you can deliver what they want, which is $500,000, then they're not that concerned about how they get it. They just want to get it, you know, and you have that power with a loan. Real quick fundamentals, just so that we cover it. So all loans go through on the 3 C's. So I usually talk about this in every class, but no loans go through without them. So what are the 3 C's? Every loan is based on the cash flow of the borrower. So however we come up with that cash flow, it could be the rent, could be their income, but cash flow is a piece of the equation. The second C would be the collateral. So is this property worth what we're paying? Or does there need to be some amount of money to compensate? But that will be evaluated on every loan transaction. And then finally, the credit. So you need to pay your bills. So if you don't pay your bills, you'll have a harder time getting a mortgage, you know. So those 3 C's every time. So whenever people call me in a panic and they say, my loan's not going through, without referring to the 3 C's, and we're interviewing and we're finding out if there's a problem with the 3 C's, because if there is, that may be an insurmountable problem or it's something we can fix, but you either need to fix one of the 3 C's. We already talked about never taking no for an answer, so I encourage everybody to get their dream scenario on the table with somebody who knows what they're doing, and find out where, if they're deficient in an area, start addressing the deficiency, but don't take no for an answer. So if you want to own 10 homes at, you know, $6 million and have a lot of rentals and things, and currently you don't have anything, that is an achievable dream. You need to roadmap it, start working on it. It could be starting with this plan that we laid out, buy your first couple primary residences, convert a couple of rentals, and start, like, you don't need $1.2 million to acquire $1.2 million in real estate. In this class, you've been presented a playbook where you can do it with $50,000 and a job. So it's important to know that.
Absolutely.
The last thing I want to say is, you kind of touched on it already, which I loved. It was, and I have it written down right here, real estate transactions, it's a business transaction. It's a business deal. It's not an emotional deal. Now, it is emotional, right? But it's a business transaction. And so just like you said, if you know, it's not working out with one house, you know, let it go, move on to the next. As a seller, you get very attached to your home. And so you add a lot of value personally, you have the memories in there, but if you're gonna go sell a personal home, realize it's a business transaction is what it is. So if you can keep those emotions out of it, and I'll just end with one story, is, you know, there's a story of a buyer that was a really picky buyer, and they went through multiple homes and just picked them apart, you know, even when it was an open house, and the listing agents there, the sellers even probably present, and they just come in, oh my gosh, what about this color? I can't believe someone would pick it, and just nitpicked all the homes. Finally, after months of looking, found what she said was her dream home, but she was a basket case, and she was emotional, and she, at the 10th hour, right before they had an opportunity to back out, so they're at the end of their contingencies, and it was now or never. If you wanted to back out, you better do it tonight or not. And she decided, she texted her agent and said, I want out. So the agent said, are you sure? Is this really what you want? Don't you want to sleep on it? Nope, this is it. This is what I want. Okay. So she sent the termination paper over to the agent, and they had a backup offer in place. Backup offer meaning there was a second buyer, that contract got accepted, and the first offer fell through, second buyer would be in position. Early the next morning, about 5:30 in the morning, the agent looks at her phone. It's a text message from her buyer. Is it too late to still get the house? So she was emotional. She finally slept on it, and she thought, oh my gosh, I made a mistake. Well, ended up where the agent was able to call the other agent, and that agent said, I sent the backup offer that they're going to be in primary position. I sent it over to them, but they have not gotten back to me yet. So I think you're in luck. And they were able to close on the home. But I just take that because it does get emotional. But on my side, as a real estate agent, I see the business side, and it really, really helps yourself on both selling and buying if you can leave the emotions out of it and look at it as a business transaction.
At on our wall at Black Diamond Mortgage, we have a poster. It's called "Stay in the Boat," and it's got 3 scenes, and it shows people going through a mortgage transaction. And the third scene is everybody jumping out of the boat because they're all freaking out, and then they have to get back in the boat and start with a new closing date because everybody freaked out. So stay in the boat, and yeah, like on that termination letter, you know, like don't sign something right away. Take your time. Yeah, be a professional. Do we have any other questions from the audience? We're pretty much right at the point we wanted to be at to wrap this thing up. Go ahead.
Early on, you talked about you staying in houses for 2 years to get the tax benefit, but then throughout the process you're talking about, you're saying you can stay in for 1 year. If you do that, you lose your tax benefit if you want to sell 3 years later or whatever, correct?
So, you know, little disclaimer, check with your accountant on all tax advice. I'm not an accountant. But the deal is the tax on your primary residence after you've had 2 years in it, you get this huge write-off that's allowed without paying the tax. And so most people the other strategy that's not the one we talked about today is the one that Curtis did. It goes back years in the United States, is you buy a house, and at the 2-year anniversary, you sell the house, carry the money over to the next house, and you don't have to pay tax on that profit. And that's a good strategy if you're gonna carry the down payment money from the prior house, because you don't want to pay tax on it. So tax avoidance is a completely different strategy. So as a general rule, tax avoidance is a 2-year strategy per home. But if you're not selling the home, then this is not a problem, because you're only going to pay the tax when you get the sale or the capital gain. So the easy answer is if you're doing multiple properties and you want to do tax avoidance, you're not selling right away. And down the line, you might roll these properties into what they call 1031s if you want to make transfers. You can keep it tax-free for a long time. So two separate strategies, make sure you have them separate. One is real estate accumulation with limited down payment. The other is tax savings. You can do both, but they are different. Does that cover it for
Yep.
you? Yeah.
It sure does.
All right, well, no further questions. The material is gonna be available. If you didn't get us your email address, we're gonna email it out. So make sure we have your email address, and thanks for joining us. We'll have another one next month.
Thank you.